and diplomatic relations. Most importantly, Bangladesh has moved the climate change narrative from one of resilience to one of prosperity through the Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan and the Delta Plan 2100. It is also the momentous occasion of 50 years of the father of the nation of Bangladesh, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, who was once described by the Fidel Castro as comparable to the Himalayas when Castro said, I have not seen the Himalayas, but I have seen Sheikh Mujib. In personality and courage, this man is the Himalayas. While we are in no position to tell the people of Bangladesh about the father of their nation, we can, however, speak about the moment in time when leaders who speak for their people create the path for the nation to move forward. And in this, there are few comparable to Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. While he was known for his socialist, welfare oriented policies and diplomatic achievements, he was also known for his humanity, which is why it is said that Mujib does not belong to Bangladesh, but to the people around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, to reflect on the Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan and Delta Plan 2100, may we have the honor to play a video message from His Excellency Mr. Sabir Hossain Chaudhry, Chairman of the Standing Committee, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change of Bangladesh, and Honorary President, Interparliamentary Union, Geneva. Unfortunately, he could not be here with us physically, but we are very fortunate to have his message for him. Can we please play the video message, please?
First, let me acknowledge the vision and leadership of the Balipara Foundation and, of course, my very good friend Ranjit. I think the work that you're doing in terms of nature and how you have a convergence between nature and economics is fundamental when we approach the challenges that not only confront Bangladesh, but a lot of the countries in the world today because of the growing impacts of climate change. And let me preface my remarks by saying two things. First is that Bangladesh contributes least to the problem of global emissions. If you look at statistics, it's not even 0.5%, and yet we are the most impacted. So of course there are issues of climate justice, climate equity, but I think in Bangladesh we have over the years transitioned. There's been a change in mindset. We don't see ourselves not as victims, of course, which we are, but we see ourselves more as leaders when it comes to adaptation and building resilience. And when I talk about resilience, it's not just absorbing shocks, but absorbing them and then placing ourselves at an even higher level by bouncing back, so that when the next impact is with us, we are better equipped to embrace that impact. So that'd be the first point. The second point in your question, you referred to policies and plans. I think in Bangladesh, we have something even more fundamental and even more critically important, and that is the Constitution of Bangladesh. And I'm very happy and proud to have been part of a process whereby we have a provision in our Constitution now, which talks about protection and improvement of the environment. So it's not just protection, it's also improvement. Which is a completely different direction. So we are not happy with the status quo. We actually want to bring about a qualitative change. And the other is it refers specifically to safeguarding and protecting wetlands, forests, biodiversity, wildlife for current and future citizens of the country. That in itself is a huge sustainability issue. And we have this provision in our Constitution under a section where we refer to as fundamental principles of state policy. So what that actually is that whatever plans, whatever legislation, whatever policies, whatever allocation of resources through the budgetary process we have is going to look at it through the lens of protecting and improving the environment. I think that is huge. So this is in terms of how we run the state. So governments are actually obliged to take that into account. And this has been a huge help plans. You're talking about the Delta Plan, the Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan. And what is really interesting about all these is, we are moving from adaptation to resilience to prosperity. And that is a very unique change in mindsets. But people look at adaptation and resilience and stop there. But then what we are saying is, how can we transform, having achieved that resilience, how can we transform that to prosperity? And how can that prosperity then benefit the people that we represent, in terms of bringing about a change in their lives and livelihoods? So I think that is a very important context to have when we talk about Bangladesh. And of course, we all know the geographical position of the country. We are in the delta, the Ganges, the Brahmaputra, and the Meghna Delta, which is the third largest after the Amazon and the Congo. And we are at the lowest point of that delta. So it means any rise in sea level is going to impact us hugely, as it already is. And if you visualize a map of Bangladesh, you've got the Bay of Bengal to the south, and then you've got the Himalayas to the north. So we are like sandwiched in between. And on the one hand, we have rising sea levels, which is going to displace 40 million people, just a 1 meter rise in sea level. That is more than the population of many countries. And remember, Bangladesh is one of the most densely populated countries in the world. So losing land area and then people being displaced, and these are probably the most marginalized, the most vulnerable. They don't have access to resources. And then losing your land where you could have grown food, so your food security is impacted. And then you have the glacial melt to your north, which means that we have flooding in the short term, because the water from the melted glaciers flow through the major rivers into the Bay of Bengal. So you have flooding in the short term, and in the long term, or even perhaps now medium term, because of the rate of global warming, we are talking about freshwater scarcity. So water stress is another problem that we have in Bangladesh in the medium to long term. And as we all know, the Himalayas are the water towers for South Asia. So you have close to 800 million people who are actually relying on the glaciers in the Himalayas for the fresh water. And as we all know, if you look at what the science is telling us, most of the glaciers are going to be gone by the year 2030 if current temperature rises continue. And we know now that based on current commitments of various countries, we are looking at a temperature rise which is close to 2.8 degrees Celsius. And we know that out of the Paris Agreement, we talked about a 1.5 degrees Celsius increase, and we are already at 1.1. So what we have to take careful note of is the devastation, the pain, the loss, the destruction that we see today is based on just a temperature increase of 1.1. We are nowhere near 1.5. So 1.5 is not even a safe or a comfort zone. Think of the destruction and the impact if the temperature rises to 1.15, not even 1.2. So, these are realities that we have to take into account, which is why now the discourse has moved. If you look at the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, it started off with a focus on mitigation. So the first 10 years, we were all focused on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Then the world realized that not enough was being done and people are suffering. So there also has to be a focus on adaptation. So the first 10 years mitigation, the next 10 years adaptation. And now in the third 10 years, 30 years on, we are looking at a situation where both mitigation and adaptation are not enough. We have not done enough in those areas. And now we are talking about loss and damage. So this has now become the third pillar. And Bangladesh, of course, has been advocating very strongly for it. When I was in Sharm el-Sheikh for COP27, I was the ministerial lead for the LDC ministers and closely involved in the discussions on loss and damage. And what we have had is at least that acknowledge that this is a new reality and action has to be taken. Of course, we are still some time away and processes away in terms of mobilizing the funding, identifying the sources of that funding, how the funding will be distributed. But at least we have made an important step. The concern, however, is that, at the end of the day, we all know that mitigation is the best form of adaptation. So if we continue to fail to rein in temperatures, and if you're looking at 2.8 as a global average, which means that for some countries who are near the tropic or the equator, you're looking at 3.3, 3.4 degrees. So at the end of the day, loss and damage becomes academic because everything will be loss and damage. You will not be talking about adaptation. And this is all the more reason why we should also look at nature-based solutions. One of the things that Bangladesh is now doing, and I'm very glad that we are doing it, is we are trying to institutionalize environmental statistics. We are trying to put a value on nature. I don't want to commercialize it, but I think what is important to realize is if you're not able to measure an asset, you're never going to be able to value it. So if I give you an example of Bangladesh, we have the Sundarbans, which is the largest mangrove forest that we have in the world. And we share that in part with India as well. 60% of the Sundarbans are in Bangladesh and 40% in India. How during every major tropical cyclone, the Sundarbans have acted as a shield to protect coastal communities. So how do you put a value to that? How do you put a value to the carbon sink that is already in the Sundarbans? How do you value ecosystems? So, I think trying to establish a base which captures the value of the natural capital that we have is very, very important. And then we try to, make sure that natural resources is not depleted. Rather that we are able to increase it. And our idea is that we will also try and reflect it in our GDP. Because as I've said, unless we are able to capture and measure the worth of the services that nature is providing, we are never going to be able to value it or to protect it. So I think that is also an important step that Bangladesh is taking. And how you bring this convergence between nature and economics, how do you align these two principles so that at the end of the day, it's a win-win situation for everyone. And of course, the Eastern Himalayas are a critical region in that regard, in terms of how it weaves together, not just the major economies of India and China, but also that of countries like Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal. So I think the work that the Balipara Foundation is doing and this event that we are having in Dhaka, Bangladesh, is of course extremely timely. The other very important dimension is that if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, we are about halfway through. And if you look at Asia Pacific, we are behind on each and every goal. And in some cases, as with the climate goal, there is actually regression. So 2030 is certainly not going to see us achieve the SDGs. If it is going to be business as usual, we are looking at 2065 or 68 perhaps. So there's a lot of work to be done. And all avenues, all potential areas that we can tap into are going to be extremely critical. And in Bangladesh, we see climate change as an existential crisis. We also talk about a planetary emergency where you have the climate impact, you have the increasing frequency and impact of disasters, you have water stress, which I've talked about, you have the loss in biodiversity, you also have challenges with food security. And of course, the other important point is, we are not living within planetary boundaries. So every year there is planetary overshoot. So how do we harmonize, if you like, the challenges that we have and find a common response for the common security and common good of the people in the region.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. Have a lovely day. Bye.
And you. Bye.
To continue further and reflect on this subject, may we have on stage our respected speakers, Shri S. Ramadorai, former CEO and Managing Director of Tata Consultancy Services India and former advisor to the Prime Minister of India in the National Council on Skill Development, Government of India. Can we have a round of applause for him, sir, please? May we please have His Excellency Mr. Sam Sharon, former Foreign Secretary of India and Prime Minister's Special Envoy for Nuclear Affairs and Climate Change, on stage, please. May we please have Shri Ram Madhav, Member, Governing Council, India Foundation, on stage with us. Round of applause, please. And Professor A.K. Inamul Haq, Dean, Faculty of Business and Economics, East West University of Bangladesh, with a round of applause, please. And to moderate the session, may we please have Ambassador Tariq Karim, Director of the Center for Bay of Bengal Studies, on stage with a round of applause. I would like to request the volunteers to please come and give the microphones to our respected speakers. So we have 4 mics and 5 speakers on stage. I would like all of you to please share the mics. Will that be all right? Or you would like to stand here? Okay. So I'm handovering the podium to our moderator. Please have a round of applause and let's enjoy the session.
Thank you very much. Those words from Mr. Sabir Hussain Chaudhry, whom I have the privilege to look upon as a friend, were indeed inspiring. I think they set the tone and tenor of our discussions at our conference. Welcome to all at the inaugural session of the 10th Eastern Himalayan Naturenomics Forum, an initiative so commendably launched several years ago by the Balipara Foundation. And the theme this time is Ecology is Economics. Many people are puzzled by this expression. They seem almost antipodal to each other. But as the discussions will, I hope, bring out, even when we talk of the environment is just one aspect of the ecology. The ecology is everything that makes up this world. Human beings, animals, flora, fauna, waters, and this is a planet which is an oceanic planet. And therefore, everything is interconnected with that. If we don't look on it that way and just focus on one aspect of what comprises the holistic ecology, then we are likely to overlook a lot of things that are essential to keeping us going and helping us to survive. In this golden jubilee of Bangladesh's independence, we commence our proceedings by remembering and paying homage and deep respects to the founding father of Bangladesh, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. His ideals and far-sighted vision gave birth to the Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan, launched earlier this year, and that dovetails into the very ambitious and visionary Bangladesh Delta Plan 2100, the brainchild of his illustrious daughter, Sheikh Hasina, the Honorable Prime Minister of Bangladesh. In a sense, I would perhaps describe this as a legacy brainchild, because this ultimately, if we can translate into reality, and it will bring a lot of things together, will be the keystone to our survival as a nation, as well as peace and stability in the region and the world. I would not like to say too much about the Mujib, about these two plans, just to mention that this plan counteracts climate-induced damages and losses by equipping vulnerable communities, industry, and the government optimizing financial tools and models that will be key to embracing a new risk management paradigm, and that would also bring about resilience and stability, especially for small businesses, vulnerable populations, and the economy. It leverages the financing of the 8th five-year plan, 2021 to 25, Vision 2041 of Bangladesh, and Bangladesh Delta Plan 2100, which is the mega plan that we have for ensuring peace, prosperity, and stability of our country. It synergizes with the Bangladesh Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan, the National Adaptation Plan, and the nationally determined contribution submitted in 2020. And it focuses on unlocking a pathway for a fast-track delivery. Saurav mentioned that we need to think big. I would add to that we not just need to think bigger, we need to run and act faster. As Mr. Sabir Hussain Chaudhry mentioned, with 1.1 increase in global temperatures and global warming already, it has brought us, midnight is not 5 minutes away. We are perhaps 2 minutes away from midnight. It's already wreaking havoc across coastal communities around the world, and Bangladesh is right at the forefront of it. I shudder to think what will happen when actually we top 2.5, and that's still a way to go. The Delta Plan 2100, which I refer to and I will always look on as the Prime Minister's legacy plan, is a long-term integrated techno-economic mega plan. It weaves in technology and whatever is happening in the ecosystem and ecology around us, and integrates all Delta-related sector plans and policies, enveloping a Delta vision and strategies that make it possible to integrate sector plans, and etc. So this will involve a lot of activities across various fronts. And without further ado, I will now request or call on each of the distinguished panelists over here who are here from far and wide to share their vision or their reaction to the term ecology is economy, and share with us what they think is the way to go forward. Perhaps each of you could, I'll go turn by one, perhaps each of you could speak for 2-3 minutes and then have an interacting conversation. Each of you will have questions of what the others are saying. Each of you will have additions to what the others are saying. We would like this to be a conversation. So may I start with a speaker from my far left, Shri Ram Madhav ji. Aap bataiye.
Thank you, Ambassador Karim. Namaskars and good afternoon to everybody present. Thank you, Mr. Ranjit Bhattakur, for bringing us together on this very important subject of the day for not only people here or people in India, but for the whole world. As an Indian, I feel proud that under the leadership of our country, India is making huge contributions to addressing this challenge of climate. That includes our contributions towards preserving or protecting the environment in the entire region, efforts to reduce emissions through various technology-induced measures, and also investing heavily in areas, in fields which will help convert this challenge also into an opportunity in terms of economy and development. But also it makes me prouder when I get to know about what Bangladesh is doing under the leadership of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. This plan that you talked about, Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan, the very name of it makes this plan so different, so fresh, and so visionary that we have so far heard about climate action, We have heard about climate resilience, or as Mr. Savir just now mentioned. We have heard about many things leaders talking. But here is a leader who is talking about climate prosperity. The challenge, which of course you have not created, as again he rightly mentioned, glaciers are not melting because of Bangladesh, but you are facing floods. You are facing the rising levels of the oceans around you. You are facing the consequences, but you are not just complaining. You are today ready with a plan to create prosperity out of this challenge. And I've gone through parts of it. Very ambitious, very visionary. So sometimes I feel that where the global north, the developed, rich north, is abandoning this challenge by saying that no, global warming is just what? You said 1.1 degrees. It's just a very minimal rise. Don't worry too much about it. And today, in the name of Ukraine crisis and shortage of fuel and all, developed countries are restarting their coal-fired, power plants today. Where the north, global north, is abandoning the responsibility, there it appears that global south, under the leadership of whether it is Prime Minister Modi in India or Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina here, is taking up head-on, taking up with a visionary approach. So I think this plan is very unique, and the number of points it highlights are very, very significant. I have found three very important points, but because there is not much time, you said 3 minutes for initial comments, I will just only point out those three. One is on population. Every additional human being on this earth is adding to the climate challenge. And I find, today, just a month back, we have crossed that 8 billion mark. Today, 8 billion first child was born on 15th of November, last month. Whereas here in Bangladesh, which is the world's 8th largest country in terms of population, the total fertility rates, the number of children a woman gives birth to in her lifetime, are less than that of India. It makes me feel so happy that in managing the populations, managing demographies, Bangladesh is doing even better than India and much better than the other neighbor Pakistan. You are at 1.9 or 1.92. We are at 2.15. Pakistan is at 3.1. You are able to manage populations well here. Second, non-traditional technologies to use for facing the challenge of climate. This plan has talked about many things, the hubs that it talks about, the very non-traditional way it wants to deploy technology to mitigate the climate challenge is so wonderful. And thirdly, and this I consider as the most important aspect when we talk about climate change, that is where you need non-traditional ways, non-traditional technologies to mitigate it, you need traditional ways of living to also address the challenge. If we want the luxury, the prosperity levels of America to be available to every Bangladeshi citizen or an Indian citizen, we need 5 Earths. Obviously, we have only one. That means you need to turn back to your traditional ways of living, traditional livelihood mechanisms, methods. This policy talks about that also. Apart from these three, many more are there. This is a very comprehensive thing. And what is so unique about it is coming not from any very developed country of the world, but a country which unfortunately is categorized as a CDS country, which it is not. It is a developing country. It is a part of the global south, and it is coming from this country, which is really very great thing, and we must applaud the leadership of this country for coming out with such a visionary and progressive plan. I will end here my initial comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ram Madhavji. I think you are truly the intellectual politician that many think or look upon you as indeed I have seen you when I was in India. Let me move now, because we have 4 different genres of people here. There's a politician, there's an academic, there's a diplomat, and there's the corporate sector. We bring all of these together on this stage to interact. And may I mention, sir, that even as we are started off on our conversation today, the Honorable Prime Minister has today virtually launched the Global Hub on Locally Led Adaptation in Bangladesh. We realize that the big conversations will keep going on, and loss and damage, which we have agreed in principle at Sharm el-Sheikh. We arrived at the very last minute before everyone left. Will take time. In the meantime, we can't sit twiddling our thumbs waiting for the world to come together. We have to do things ourselves, and that is behind this initiative. Let us start doing things together and show we can do it so others can follow by emulation. I would like now to call on Professor A.K. Inamul Haq from Bangladesh, a very distinguished academic, to share his thoughts on this subject.
Thank you. Can you hear me well? Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. It is my privilege to be here in this particular stage with all the dignitaries in particular. Let me put my thoughts on it. Bangladesh was born against the backdrop of cyclone. 1970, 500,000 people were killed. So when Bangladesh, in its own constitution, mentioned that protecting environment, improving the quality of environment is one of the fundamental principles of governance, as the Minister Sabir Chaudhary mentioned, it was in our blood to look into this. The second important point when I look into Bangladesh, that when Bangladesh is looking for strategy of improvement after the liberation, we had very difficult time. And the government realized over time that we need to work on it. Obviously, foreign aid was with Bangladesh. But with this government coming in power, particularly this time, the government decided that we should think long term, not just 5 years. 5-year plan was the beginning. And the first plan was done with the Delta plan, which is the Delta Plan 2100, which was designed to invest in the nature, in our water resources. That was our primary. Most of the time on environment, people talk about forest resources. Delta Plan was designed because Bangladesh is almost like a gift of the nature. It came out from the rivers as a delta, and obviously we need protection. Now, over time, what Bangladesh did, this once they developed this, started spending resources and planned resources on water resources first. Water resources highly connected with our agriculture. So it actually looked into the economic activity and protected Bangladesh from food shortages and ensured food security. So that was one of the major targets. The second important part that Bangladesh did in terms of not only agriculture, but also realized that Bangladesh has a huge population. And this is where Bangladesh probably did a landmark change. Not only we did this, Rahman mentioned about one issue, which is the fertility rate. But I'll give you another example, which is even on the women issues, 17 to 18% of women are in the labor force in India. About 15 to 16 is in Pakistan. And the number for Bangladesh is 35, 36%. Almost like a significant jump from neighboring countries. And this came to surprises for many, that how did it happen? In particular, in a country with a large number of Muslim population. So Bangladesh is an example, a leader in showing to the world that, look, the typical way of thinking is not true. We can take leadership. So Delta 2100 plan was the first step. Mujib Prosperity Plan was designed for a different purpose, giving a hope. From vulnerability converges into a prosperity. And that was the target. Again, is built on the Delta Plan. An idea was that within 2030, government should plan certain actions. And that is what we thought about it. So in a way, Bangladesh builds a strategy based on the suffering that we have done because of the nature, and the nature we cannot control. For example, Ganges GBM, which is Ganges Brahmaputra Meghna Basin, we are at the last end. only 7% of the catchment is within Bangladesh. 93% of the catchment river water runs through Bangladesh. And all the rivers, almost all of them, except Ganges, are almost free river. Means there is no dikes, they are all moving. The only dikes and embankment we did is in the polders, which is in the coastal area, by which we protect almost millions of population. Whenever we say in Bangladesh, and many people have heard about it, that Bangladesh with a sea level rise will go underwater. The challenge is not at the coastal district. It is actually the middle district where we never built any dikes and polders. So the prediction that in the middle district, we might have a problem. The polders are there. And obviously Sundarban is the other case that we have Sundarban, which is almost like a natural protection. I think I will stop here and let others speak. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Inamul Haq. I think you cast a lot of light on what went into the making of the Mujib prosperity plan. The realization that we have to do things ourselves on the ground to transform the lives of the people while whatever we are trying to do, addressing the larger question, keep happening. I would like to bring you in, but I think I would like to keep you to the end if you don't mind, and request the distinguished representative of the corporate sector now to give his reactions or opinion to whatever has been stated on this subject and by the preceding speakers.
You can hear me now, I'm sure. I thought I was going to be the last so that I could say that I agree with all of them. But that's not to be. But I think the critical way this conference has been put together by the Balipara Foundation as well as the Naturenomics group, I've been part of that from the time it got incorporated. We in the Tata group supported it fully, and we believed that knowing a 150, 160-year-old group, sustainability, people are all integrated into the way of looking at the business. The community is a stakeholder for anything which we do. So it's in our DNA. I was reading an article today in the Times of India, which essentially from a Nobel laureate from the Chicago School of Economics. Childhood skills shape our life success. Low-cost policies can truly strengthen these. How do you remember when we grew up as children, appreciating nature, appreciating conservation, appreciating reducing wastage was always a way of life. And we grew with it and we started practicing it, except in between where we lost it. And then now we are trying to fix the problems in terms of mitigation, solution to the problem, bringing in technology, etc., which absolutely is a must. Second article which caught my attention again this morning, which is not such a good story, is the morning has broken. This was in the Hindustan Times. I don't know how many of you read it. As the climate crisis intensifies, it is sparking expressions of ecological grief around the world. These include funerals for glaciers, a reef grief song contest, art projects that put giant chunks of icebergs in city centers, and a remembrance day for the lost species that features poems, plays, dinners, and cabaret. So this is the true nature of what everyone is seeing it and everyone is beginning to act, which is, if not too late, it's absolutely necessary. And that's what this report, the report of the Bangladesh, brings out very, very effectively, in my opinion. Time is not on our side, and we need to act, but we cannot give up. So from a research perspective, there are a great number of opportunities. At the end of the day, implementation is the key, absolutely. And technology is going to be very critical in whatever we do. We believe in action, we believe in implementation and measurement. We start with a baseline and start acting on each one of these, whether it affects us or not, and then try to see what we can do. I think even in addition to what Bangabandhu talked about this, India's father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi, talked about a zero carbon lifestyle, and self-sustaining villages inspires India to have its first fully solar village, Modhera in Gujarat. That does not become only energy surplus, but also generates additional income for the people of the village. We have found a livelihood. At the end of the day, localize as much as possible, bring in technology, connectivity, but then data has to speak, and then action on the ground has to be involving everyone, including the community, the corporates, the NGOs, the government, state governments, etc., etc. That's what I want to say. That's when programs succeed, that's when programs are measurable, that's where action on the ground takes place at a speed which is unimaginable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ramadurai. And now I'll move to my good friend Sham. You've been at the forefront of the negotiations for a long time. And of course, you are a very distinguished thinking diplomat with whom I've always had the privilege and of interacting. Your thoughts?
I hope all diplomats are thinking diplomats. Thank you very much. First of all, let me express my gratitude to the Balipara Foundation and to the International University of Bangladesh for hosting this really remarkable conversation, I would say, amongst all of us on something which is really an existential challenge for not only for people of Bangladesh and of India, but the entire world. But let me begin by commenting on the plan, which you have referred to. What struck me about the plan is, of course, its comprehensiveness and the fact that it combines both immediate action with a kind of a longer term vision, which is what we need. I think it very rightly has a focus on adaptation because the unpleasant fact is that even if emissions became zero tomorrow, by some miracle, climate change will not stop. In fact, the latest IPCC report has pointed out that even if we are aiming for 1.5, the accumulated greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, which will diminish only very, very slowly, ensure that impacts of climate change will probably continue for quite some time and perhaps at an even greater intensity, at least for some time. Which means, therefore, that whether we like it or not, for the next several years, our focus has to be on adaptation. And it is in this aspect that I find the plan very worthwhile because it focuses attention precisely on adaptation. And in that context, I was particularly impressed by this concept of adaptation hubs. Because climate change is global, but its impacts are local. And therefore, in that sense, that particular innovative way of dealing with adaptation, I think is very worthwhile. So there are various reasons why I think this plan is very worthwhile, and a great deal of that plan could very easily be adapted, by India itself, as Mr. Rahman said. That what is remarkable about how Bangladesh has been dealing with these issues, the manner in which it has tried to be inclusive in its approach, has paid great deal of attention to gender factor, a great success, I think, story. These are examples which I think my own country would benefit from. Let me just extend this to something that you and I have talked about before. And this is not taking away anything from what Bangladesh itself is doing, But I have always felt, that the subcontinent, South Asia, is one single ecological entity. It is an integrated ecological unit. Therefore, what happens in one part of the subcontinent, whether you like it or not, does have an impact on another part of the subcontinent. Which means whatever good things we are able to do ourselves as a country, this has to, in fact, work together with other countries in the region. So a Bangladesh plan needs to be fitted together with a subcontinental plan, just as an Indian plan must be fitted into that subcontinental plan. The other aspect and linked to this is the fact that, all the natural assets which we are talking about. Balipara Foundation has talked about Eastern Himalayas, but it is not just the Himalayas, but the glaciers in the Himalayas from which the rivers flow, and the rivers flow down into the ocean. This is one living system. And if it is one living system, then if you try to chop it up into pieces of property, and each country saying, this is my part of the property, I am afraid we are never going to resolve this the challenge that we are facing. So therefore, it is extremely important that we not only recognize the interconnection amongst these ecological assets, but also recognize that there is a certain kind of unity of these assets as far as this entire region is concerned, and we have to take this into account while we go forward. So how can we fit it into that larger picture? Of course, there are things on which we are working together, like the mangroves, for example. In the Sundarbans, you have the larger part of that mangroves, but we also have part of it. But I think any rational way of really trying to preserve, to regenerate those mangroves requires India and Bangladesh to work together. There has been a mention made of the Delta Plan for 2100. Now, any Delta Plan which does not involve the countries in the region working together who share the Bay of Bengal, how are we going to really have a rational plan? So my plea is that through these conversations that we have today and tomorrow, I hope that we can bring that dimension into our deliberations, because that, I think, is very essential. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shyam. I think you brought out several very key issues here, and I empathize with them because, as you said, we've been talking about it for some time ourselves. One, that this was an integrated ecosystem, and then in came Westphalia. Westphalia's hard borders are not respected by the ecosystem or the ecology. We have to adapt to the rules of nature, and if anything hurts nature, nature will at some time hit us back. So that's number one. Number two, we have to cooperate with each other on this. If this is an integrated ecosystem, and as you mentioned, Sundarbans is divided by the Westphalia. But it is one Sundarbans. To me, it doesn't make sense to refer to it as, Eastern Sundarbans and Western Sundarbans. They have their own laws governing it. They have their own system in which either the ecosystem will flourish or it will die. We need to have more conversations seriously. So, in a sense, and this is where Bangladesh is, instead of waiting around for that conversation to happen around the table, we have to strike out ourselves and take a leadership role. And I have to salute the Prime Minister. She has led the charge on all the climate discussions, major climate discussions, until, well, this year. This year, I think she realized that we have to do something ourselves, because the larger conversations and the division still there between the industrialized developed countries and the not so developed South are still wide. The gap is still to be closed to come to a consensual point. And this may take us some time to reach that consensual point, but we can't wait for that, because the damage is already happening in the 15-year communities. We are actually, as mentioned, earlier, we are at the lowest point of this delta, the third largest delta of the world. We are struck by a double whammy effect. When you mention of Eastern Himalayan system, yes, the Eastern Himalayas and the rivers and the Bay of Bengal, which is the part of the Indian Ocean, they are one. They all interact with each other. The Eastern Himalayas are also known as the third pole. The third pole is receding. It has lost more than 40% in less than 40 years. And if that disappears, Mr. Sabir Hussain Chaudhary mentioned about the various cascading effects it will have on various other factors. Potable drinking water, rainfall, the monsoon climates will change, the river flows will change. What happens? There is a certain equilibrium in the Bay of Bengal which keeps our coastline where it is, with the bay pushing in and the rivers pushing out. When the river's pushing out, the force decreases because the volume is decreasing. The bay will push in more. That's nature. Number two, global warming is not just warming the ocean surface. It travels down as the carbon is absorbed. We now have undercurrents of warm water that is eating from inside, lower down, the North Pole and the South Pole, the polar ice. So basically, the polar ice cap is being subverted both from heat from the top as well as heat from the under the water. And that is why you have reports of large chunks of the ice cap breaking and floating into the ocean. That also is adding to the volume of water. Who will hurt first? Countries like us. Warming itself increases the volume of water, but additional water coming in is going to have a multiplier effect. So we ran over time. Do we have a few minutes? The organizers advised me for questions among the participants. I will take 5 minutes, just around, each of you to give a response to whatever you have heard from the others. 1 minute each, and then I'll wind up. Ram Madhavji.
As I said in the beginning, this plan is also very ambitious. So as Ambassador Shamsar and other panelists mentioned, the real challenge is in its implementation. I'm sure that the government here has the determination to take it forward. And I belong to that school doesn't believe in doomsday in terms of this ecological challenge that the world is facing. Not that I consider it as any lesser challenge. We do understand the seriousness of the challenge. But I sincerely believe that with real policies, correct policies and real action on the ground, we can definitely overcome this challenge. For example, as I said, population is the most important challenge when it comes to managing the ecology. But globally, population levels are decreasing, including in countries like Bangladesh. 20 years, 30 years from now, you will start the population numbers coming down. India will hit its peak sometime in 2050. Then its populations also will start coming down. By 2100, probably we'll have 1.1 billion people in India. So rather than being very, very pessimistic or very scary about the future, we need to be proactive about what needs to be done in the short term. In that, I feel that, for a country of this size, 160 million people, to talk about certain goals of, eradicating extreme poverty by 2030 is not a small thing. And to say that by 2050, you need to become a prosperous country, that's what this plan says. This is quite ambitious, but you need leaders like that who are ready to have a vision for, for a dynamic progress, dynamic process, have policies in place and put them in action. I think that is where the critical factor lies. How do you implement it? This continuity with, we are all democracies. In democracies, many changes happen, but these policies, will they continue with same commitment, same determination is crucial. I hope Bangladesh will be able to take this plan forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will put it into a different perspective. I think the plan is ambitious, that is perfectly true. But this plan has cascading impacts. For example, Bangladesh has the National Adaptation Plan linked to this. 5-year plan is linked to this. So there are other short-term plans that are linked to this. But on the top of it, I think more important part, the reason I think we are sitting here is to understand that the ecology is an economy, even though they look different, but the sphere of the ecology is much bigger than the economy, and we are interconnected. So the Balipara Foundation, Eastern Himalayas, the congregation that we are having here is also a strategy to help governments in this region to understand that we need to become stewards of our nature. I think becoming stewards of the nature is an important one. This morning, Professor Partha Dasgupta was with our students, and he mentioned a few things. He mentioned something that struck me, that look, nature is going down. Capital stock of nature is going down. And as nature is going to go down, obviously its productivity is going to go down. I give one example. We had one estimate on Bangladesh to find out how much nature contributes to our GDP. 30%, 33, 35% of our GDP is directly out of our nature. Imagine that nature goes down, that will be a big blow for the governments. So I think it is, and because the ecology is interconnected, I think the strategy that we're sitting here understanding each other is also a very good strategy for us. I give you one more example. A few years ago, about 15 years ago, we started a very simple conversation between Bangladesh and India on the rivers, which is basically on the rivers, waters. Based on that conversation, Indian academics, Bangladeshi academics from all over worked together on few things. And first time we discovered that hilsha, which is a major fish in Bangladesh, is not one, there are 4 different species of hilsha exist. First time we earmarked areas where we should have sanctuaries. Result is now you can have hilsha fish go all the way to Assam. In other words, you realize that this cooperation benefits both of them. Same strategy, same conversation eventually helped Bangladesh to come together with India on cooperating on the management of Sundarban. That agreement has happened. So it is actually through these conversation efforts that probably will go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Shyam, go ahead.
Thank you. Just to take these couple of points forward, I agree that we should not be too pessimistic in terms of what the future is. The one way to look at it is that while there is an interconnection amongst various ecological factors, and therefore there are negative feedback loops. So if there is biodiversity loss, it also intensifies climate change. If climate change is intensified, it also then reacts back on biodiversity. But by the same token, if there are interventions which actually improve, say, biodiversity, then it has a positive feedback loop. Nature has a great capacity to regenerate. And I think we should be able to leverage that quality of nature as well. The second point I would like to make is a slightly, it is partly pessimistic, partly optimistic. Pessimistic is that putting on my negotiator's hat, I'm convinced that money that you think you will get from the developed West in order to finance your climate change action, that is a pipe dream. The sooner we get rid of that kind of expectation, the better it would be. So if we are able to really look at what we can do ourselves, which is very much reflected in this plan that you have. And secondly, again, I come back to what I said. you can have a multiplier effect by the countries of the region working together. So local, but expanding the local to have the entire sort of sub-region working together. I think that is what could really make a tremendous difference in terms of how we deal with this challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. And that is something which my own center believes. Local to regional, then you go global. Global is far away. If we can just solve the local and the regional, we will have made an impact globally. Sir.
I think I'll touch upon a few implementation points as well. When you look at India's 2070 net zero commitment, this has been respected globally or lauded globally. And its updated long-term low-carbon development strategy reflects a systemic plan to transition to renewables, reduce energy efficiencies, align with net zero targets. Even the 2030, the gap, how much they're going to do, is mentioned in that. Now, while India cannot yet afford to rapidly transition to renewable energy, we can certainly partner with Bangladesh on showing global leadership on climate change through its forest landscapes and wetlands protection, as an example. Second, the India's 2022 push for agroforestry is an urgently needed step in the right direction. Agroforestry is more climate resilient than monocrop cultivation. And it also sequesters a greater amount of carbon. Again, what is the kind of cooperation that is possible here? Third is the transitioning to climate-friendly cultivation practices like agroforestry in the Northeast could help sequester over 5 million tons of carbon annually in total. The region has 2.3 million hectares of land that can be reforested and a further 1.8 million hectares of agricultural land that can be rewilded through agroforestry. So it's a very large-scale implementation which can be taken up together, and it can create jobs for over 2 million people. Just this kind of an initiative. Now, Bangladesh over the last 50 years has reduced cyclone-related deaths 100-fold. And there is much to learn for other countries in the region from its disaster risk management practices, which is absolutely a sharing, which you talked about. We can create a digital platform which enables us to share the knowledge and share that so that for global good or for the region good becomes very visible. Bangladesh is also focusing on building local solutions such as amphibious housing to cope with the recurring flooding. This is between Bangladesh and Dutch collaborative initiative called the Core Bangladesh Community Resilience through rapid prototyping. I think this should be emulated in other regions to explore the effectiveness of local solutions, which we talked about. The research is in multiple areas, collaboration is in multiple areas that cannot be understated. Because what we saw during the COVID, the kind of research that took place to come with the vaccine in the shortest possible time, that's the optimistic point of which everybody is sharing, and that must be encouraged a lot. So real-time monitoring and data collection is one very clear initiative. Satellite images and tools are now highly accessible, and space age investments make that possible very clearly. And the interest in connected devices is steadily increasing, but the cost of devices remains a key barrier. So new business models and collaborations again possible in the space. And engaging and informing communities through the broad range of technologies and approaches are used to influence positive behaviors or to provide communities with the tools they need to actively participate in natural resource management. These are absolutely necessary. I think gamification can incentivize community participation in NRM and influence positive behaviors aligned with conservation. So we need to look at this, and data management analysis is another area where AI and other data management tools are used to provide real-time analysis, support decision-making, predict trends, and promote differences. I can go on and all, but the jobs of the future will be in emerging areas such as meteorology, environmental science, geophysics, marine renewable energy, hydrogen and fuel cell engineering, waste management, microgrid, biochemical engineering, synthetic biology, biotechnology. And there are a lot of startups emerging in this area, which one is witnessing in a big way. And India is no exception, or the region is no exception. The natural capital accounting and footprinting, eco-design are areas I think the transition to a greener, cleaner future will require innovative solutions and the corporate practices across every industry and the workforce with the skills to design, implement, monitor, and advocate them. I think the green jobs, as we all know, are projected to grow exponentially, as we would need huge numbers of clean energy experts, wind turbine, solar panel, hydropower technicians, electric vehicle workers, new plastic designers and engineers, urban farmers, forest fire inspectors and prevention specialists, environmental specialists, and this goes on. So I think these are all the opportunities that are there. The corporates look at it this way to create the future, and not only a commercial opportunity is possible, but also impact on the ground, impact in the communities, but a collaboration where everyone is together in this game. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean,
Can I just take 30 seconds?
okay,
Since
sir.
Ambassador
Sure.
Shamsaran has categorically said that don't expect, it's a pipe dream, the word you use, to expect any financing, climate financing from the rich north. Since Global South is, in a way, the victim of whoever is responsible for the situation, it is Global South which has to take climate action into its hands. We need to be more proactive. We need to come together more, from Brazil to South Africa to Indonesia to India to Bangladesh. The leaders of these countries have to play a proactive role. Today, Global North is not ready to finance, but Global North is ready to put targets for Fiji and Seychelles. They are forced to commit on certain emission controls, but nobody is giving them money. So here we need to come together. We need to have more dialogue, more engagement, and we then realistically work. I think that kind of an important shift has to happen. So maybe something like Global South Climate Parliament we have to create. Let leaders come together, talk about the real challenges here. Thank you.
I think that will have to be the last word because the organizers are breathing down my neck. And we could carry this conversation on for a long time. I'm quite willing to do it, but we'll have to see to that. Thank you very much for your participation. And a big round of applause to them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, our honorable speakers and the moderator, for the wonderful session. And it was quite inspiring, wasn't it, guys? Did you all enjoy and learn from it, right? Yes, thank you so much. And once again, a round of applause for them, please. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, now we'd like to prepare ourselves for the most important part of today's evening. We would like to commence the award ceremony without further ado, and to introduce our grassroots